Hey everyone, this is Tugun. I'm going to do a quick recap of my FFWC lineups. So the first thing I want to point out with the FFWC is the payout structure. Since you have to qualify for the tournament, everyone wins something. The entry itself is worth $63,000. You get last place, you still get $20,000 back. By the way, one of my entries did get last place. We'll get into that in a little bit. As you can see, you get a little bit more money, but you don't even get your entry back until you get about 30th place. So you don't even really make any money until you're in 17th place off of your entry. So yes, you get some money back, but it's still a very top-heavy tournament, where first gets $2.5 million, second gets 1.25, third 750, fourth 500. So you still really want top three, at least top five, because let's just say with my 6 entries, I just got a bunch of them and call it 40th to 90th place. I'm still, obviously I get money back from the tournament, but I still get way back less than my entries. So you still definitely want a kind of a barbell approach where, you want one of your entries getting first. You'll take first and last over a bunch in the middle. So anyways, let's go to my entries. My general strategy with this tournament, since it's top heavy, but there's only 200 entries, and I really just need to get top 3 to really make some real money, is I went very stack heavy. Because the way I figure it is if one game goes off, I want to have those players. In this case, the Dallas game went off. I went with a Dak Prescott stack, and I double stacked him with Dalton Schultz, who was a dud, and my biggest dud in the lineup, and CeeDee Lamb. And then I brought it back with ETN and Zay Jones, and obviously that was important because Zay Jones was the best player on the field. And Zay Jones was not part of my core. He was the only lineup that this stack was in was this lineup. But I was able to get exposure to him because I stacked this game. And then I filled in my lineup with core plays, if you read my article, David Montgomery. And quite frankly, David Montgomery was really the reason this lineup was the top Dak Prescott lineup, because he was only 4% used, and he was one of the best running backs on the slate. The other good running back was Derrick Henry, who was just kind of a chalk play. And then I also filled in with core play Drake London. And once I I had all these guys filled out, in my flex I had 10,200 left, and I went with Henry Titans thing. I Henry just was kind of like a chalk, whatever play. And I like pairing him with the Titans defense because if the Titans got blown out, Henry would probably roll bad and would sink my lineup anyways. And I knew the Chargers would be pretty chalky, so it was kind of a play against that. So that's just kind of how my lineup went. That's the general build I did with all of my lineups in the FFWC. So let's quickly look at the lineup that beat me. As you can see, Chipotle Addict's lineup was a stack-heavy lineup too. He just went with a lot of Jags, with a Trevor Lawrence, and then ETN, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram. So he obviously caught the Zay Jones, and Trevor Lawrence was pretty good himself. And he brought it back with CeeDee Lamb. And part of the reason he beat me was because Evan Ingram was a lot better than Dalton Schultz, quite frankly. And Lawrence was better than Dak Prescott by 9 points. He actually had Kamara, who I liked, but ended up being very chalky. Obviously, Montgomery was better than Kamara. Chris Moore was the biggest chalk of the field I was fading. I was basically pivoting. Everyone had Chris Moore, and I had Drake London, and I also had Russell Gage. Russell Gage wasn't in my article, but I talked about how much I liked Tom Brady. And when Julio was out in the morning, I dropped in the Discord and mentioned how much I liked Russell Gage. And Russell Gage ended up being half of my lineups, but not in my best lineup, and that's probably why I got second instead of first. And the Lions defense, got him a lot of points too. So that's kind of what the difference between first and second will be often. Very, similar stack idea, just a little bit different way we did it, and his edged me out a little bit. You can see in third place and lower, you started getting other lineups. He went with a stack too, with just a basic stack with a bring back, but he had Zay Jones in it as well. But here's another Dak Prescott lineup, so you can kind of see how I edged out Mr. Good Seats here. He also went with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, just like I did. And he brought also back with just Zay Jones. And he also had Derrick Henry, chalky guy, and Latavius Murray was pretty good too. And he also had the Titans defense, but he ended up going with Dulcich in the flex, and Dulcich was a dud. Again, having, I guess Montgomery and Latavius Murray were kind of similar. But, for me, Drake London obviously, helped me out there. And Jamar Chase, he spent a lot of money there, which made him have to go to Dulcich, and Jamar Chase just wasn't that good. So that's just, again, kind of similar, similar stacks, but just slightly different, filler plays and stuff like that. And, that can, in a tournament with this much money at stake, that just can, end up being a lot of money. But let's go ahead and look at some of my other lines, because you can see I did similar strategies, but just very different outcomes. We'll go ahead and look at my 20th place. This was Tom Brady. I talked about how much I like Tom Brady, and I just went with all three receivers. I liked Mike Evans. He was actually he really wasn't bad, but he was the worst of the receivers. Godwin did great, and obviously Russell Gage was great. And I used Montgomery, so obviously he was good too. But the issue with this lineup was, even though Cincinnati scored 34 points, I got absolutely nothing out of my Bengals guys. Jamar Chase was really not good. And I like Joe Mixon because he was low owned, but no touchdown, no nothing. He even had 5 catches, but just not a lot of yards and no touchdowns. So it was really the bringbacks that sunk this lineup. That goes to show you that, obviously sometimes bringbacks work great, as in this lineup, because it got me Zay Jones. But sometimes they can also sink a lineup. So, I guess you take for what I don't know what to say. Like, if someone told me Cincinnati was 34-23, I'd be like, yes, thank God for my bringbacks. But that's just not the way it works sometimes. And Evan Ingram and the Falcons just kind of fit the rest of it there. I didn't really, care too much. Although I do remember Sam's article mentioned Evan Ingram, so I was like, yeah, I'll throw in one of my lineups. And sure enough, he was right. He was a decent tight end on a pretty bad tight end slate. But really, this lineup had a lot of potential. It just needed 30 more points, but Mixon and Chase just weren't really there. And Tom Brady, bless his heart, got 300 yards, but 4 turnovers too. So couldn't quite get that 30-point game, which would have really helped this lineup and whatever. But you can see I went with a very stack-heavy approach there too. And while my initial stack was very good, the bringbacks didn't work, unlike my stack that got second. Let's go ahead and drop down. As you can see, I got lineups in near dead last place. First one was 193rd, and then dead freaking last. Let's look at the dead last one. I talked about how much I liked Hunter and Henry in my article, and this whole game was just terrible. Even though there was 54 points scored, again, just because the game has a high over/under does not mean it's going to be a very fantasy efficient game, and this is the perfect example of that. Lots of points scored, terrible fantasy outcome. I went with Mac Jones, and his pieces were cheap, so I triple stacked them. I generally don't triple stack outside unless the pieces are real cheap. Like Russell, at least Tom Brady had Russell Gage, so really didn't add that much, and he went off. And in this case, Aguilar and Henry are both really cheap, and even Myers is only 4,700. But Mac Jones threw for 112 yards, so those guys were terrible. He didn't even have a touchdown. And then I brought it back with Adams and Jacobs. It was kind of obvious. Bringbacks, and they were both terrible because this game was just fantasy nightmare. And then I filled it in with core plays, Mike Evans and Alvin Kamara. I had Alvin Kamara at 2 out of my lineups, but he was so chalky I actually was slightly under-owning him. But Mike Evans, I had 2 lineups as well. And that's pretty much it. That's kind of the way I built my lineups in this tournament. Here we can look at another lineup that did horribly. This one was a little bit less stacky because I like Drake London, so I decided to go ahead and game stack that game. I just used a Desmond Rizzo and Drake London, and I brought it back with Olave and Kamara. And again, that game was just fantasy bad. And I liked Eckler a lot. I actually the way I looked at it is people are going to like the Chargers passing game, and he was kind of a pivot off of that because yes, he could get a lot of catches, although he only got 2 catches. And he's just a very good fantasy player, but he only did 15 points, and then I just kind of filled in the rest with Drake London, and then this was the only lineup I had Deontay Johnson and Pacheco in. I kind of just got almost like I want to have him in one lineup just in case he went crazy, but this just goes to show you that you never know with a timeshare. Even though Kansas City scored 30 points, Pacheco didn't do anything. McKinnon was good. Here, let's go ahead and look at the lineups that end up in the middle. This is the lineup in some weird way I regret the most because I knew Herbert would be chalky. I didn't think he'd be this chalky, but it makes sense because what happens in the FFWC is you get some real chalk because no one wants to throw away $3,000 lineup, especially if they only have 1 or 2 lineups. They want to have those chalk guys. So I went ahead and was a little bit of a bitch and threw in one Herbert lineup, telling myself it's okay because I'll use chalk, super chalk Keenan Allen, only lineup I had Keenan Allen in, but I'd also use Eckler to make it a little bit different. And then I made it a game stack with Henry and Okonkwo, which was fine. And I don't know why. I guess Zonovan and I just kind of fit. I threw in Russell Gage, who was like Russell Gage and Drake London were basically core plays, and again, Russell Gage was great. But Zonovan and I just kind of fit. I wasn't really on him. He projected well. As you can see, he got very chalky. I don't know. This is what I get for... This is the lineup I get for being a bitch. Like, I got 76. I got 30,000. Like, less than half of my entry. Like, this is what I didn't want to happen, and this is what I deserve. I should have done a Hurt stack with like a David Montgomery bring back. That's what I should have done. Because I like David Montgomery, and Jalen Hurts can always do it. And then if I had Russell Gage, like who knows? I don't know. I probably still would have won first with it because I don't know who else I would have had in the lineup. But Hurts with one of his wide receivers, Russell Gage and David Montgomery, that would be a good start. But again, if I end up having Eckler in it, he may have sunk. Who knows how the rest of the lineup would have played out? But that's what I should have done instead. This is you think Two Gun regrets his Mac Jones lineup, or maybe he regrets his. I regret a little bit of the Desmond Ritter lineup, but I don't regret the Mac Jones lineup at all. I regret this Herbert lineup. If Herbert was the guy that was going to win someone the event, like this was just Two Gun's event not to win. That's what I should have thought. That's what I generally think, and I should have done a different lineup there. And one last thing to say about this lineup: this is why I got second because the DFS gods got mad at me. They said, no, Two Gun, you can only get second because you did a chalky Herbert lineup. And even made a little chalky with Zonovan Knight. And even though I made it a little bit more contrarian, which is kind of like what I used to tell myself that it's all good with, Russell Gage and Drake London or whatever, and Austin Eckler, it's just not me. And anyways, here's my last lineup. It was a Justin Fields lineup, and I definitely wanted to have one Justin Fields lineup. No regrets here. Because he can just, with his rush, he almost got 100 rushing yards. Just any game, Justin Fields can easily put up 30 points. So I definitely like a low-owned Justin Fields any day of the week. And I double stacked him with his main wide receivers out. Definitely Cole Kmet. And I went ahead and threw it in Equanimeous St. Brown. It's just kind of unfortunate he got injured on the first play. Because if he had that Dante Pettis touchdown or whatever, he would have done great. And obviously, I had to throw in DeAndre Hopkins. He was a core play. Like I said in the article, you don't have to have it much, but you just never know. And of course, Colt McCoy get injured, and just in general, that game just was just a terrible game. But then I also had Russell Gage and Austin Eckler as a core play. So kind of just threw in a bunch of core plays, and I had Miles Sanders as a bring back, and Miles Sanders was terrible as a bring back. Oh well. And then I filled out the rest of the lineup with Najee Harris, who I just kind of seem to like in general. No one seems to ever want to use him. but Carolina has a bad, defense against rushing generally, so he was okay. His passing game usage has gone way down. Jalen Warren vultured a touchdown, so I can see why people don't want to use him. And then just want to have the Lions defense, which is nice. But again, just it just kind of fell apart there with some of these other plays. But no regrets on this lineup. So as you can see, that's just kind of how I went about my FFWC lineups. And I initially built them because of the payout structure. I wanted stuff that would be, either first or last, but not so much first, like tippy top first necessarily, but at least be in the top or the bottom. I just didn't want to have a bunch of lineups that ended up in the middle. And I feel like, in general, I succeeded at that. So this is Two Gun. Hope you found this informational, and, check out more of our content at FTN.